Hey guys, tonight we slip beneath the velvet drapes of a Paris that doesn't exist anymore, but never really left either. The year is 1774, and the city stinks of powdered wigs, waxed mustaches, and an unspoken desperation to be noticed. You're not walking cobblestones as much as gliding over ambition, powdered sugar, and the crushed dreams of people who thought they'd marry up and ended up working down. You duck under a drooping linen line stretched between two leaning buildings in the Marais, stepping over sloshed-out chamber pots and the philosophical tears of a man who just discovered his mistress is also his laundress. Welcome to a place where everyone wants something, and nobody admits it. You're about to become someone who sells dresses but deals in something more powerful desire. And the price? Well, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born in the second room of a 3-room flat that counts as a home for 7 people and one particularly judgmental cat. Your mother swears you cried in iambic pentameter. Your father leaves before your first winter, vanishing into the wine-sodden ether of Parisian manhood, and you grow up threading needles by candlelight before you're old enough to spell gown. You learn fast, not because you're precocious, but because no one has the time to repeat instructions. Your older sisters work as chambermaids and sell gossip for a second income. You observe. You don't talk much. You listen, with your face half lit by lamp oil and your hands busy stitching hems that rich women will sigh over before tossing them across fainting couches at 15. You take your first solo assignment repairing a fraying lace cuff for a marquise who collects husbands and perfumes with equal fervor. You don't make eye contact. You memorize her ring size instead. In Paris, survival isn't about power. It's about noticing things before they notice you. That's your superpower. You see the threads others pretend aren't there. You make yourself useful, invisible, pliable. You become the kind of person who gets invited into boudoirs, not as a guest, but as a ghost with a sewing kit. And there's something about being ignored that sharpens you. It's not long before you realize the women you dress and the men they marry don't pay attention to the help until the help does something unforgettable. It begins with the fabric. You fall in love with textures, not just velvet and taffeta, but what they do to people. A duchess wrapped in green satin moves like a viper. A countess in cream chiffon becomes suddenly innocent, girlish, ridiculous. Clothes aren't fashion, they're magic spells. And you, little dressmaker, you're learning incantations. The workshop where you apprentice reeks of starch and ambition. The woman who trains you smells like cloves and contempt. She shows you how to pad a bodice to flatter a lie. She whispers that everything can be sewn except dignity. That must be stolen. You take your time. You don't want to be a seamstress forever. You want to become a name people murmur at salons and powder rooms. You want to walk into a ballroom and watch the room pause not because you entered, but because someone just remembered something deliciously scandalous you did. And all of that starts with thread. Paris, you learn, is one giant dress rehearsal for eternity. And no one's more desperate to look perfect than the people who already have everything. You see noble women aged 25 already planning their legacies. You see men with powdered hairlines and rotting teeth fretting about family crests. You see desperation hidden beneath blush and boredom. And you think, why not me? Historians still argue whether lower-class girls had any actual agency in this era, or if it's all just romantic projections from modern storytellers. But you don't feel like a passive doll in someone else's history book. You feel like a spark trapped in kindling. You're waiting. And Paris is flammable. By 17, you've crafted gowns for women whose lovers you've memorized by scent. One day, a footman brings you to the back hallway of the Hôtel de Crillon to fix a last-minute tear in a dress sleeve. You're escorted through servants' corridors, echoing with clinks and curses. And for the first time, you hear music drifting through a doorway. A real ball. Not the ones you've imagined while hemming sleeves, but the kind with chandeliers, satin gloves, and powdered laughter. You pause. You adjust your posture, and someone opens the door at just the right moment. A Marquis glances sideways. He sees you, not in your patched-up smock, but framed in candlelight like an oil painting. You meet his gaze for 2 full seconds before pretending not to notice. You drop your eyes. That's your first real stitch in a different kind of pattern. Later that night, he finds you again. You're outside, waiting for a carriage, your hands dusted with thread and your mind spinning. He offers you wine from a flask shaped like a dagger. You refuse. He's delighted. This is how it begins. Not with seduction, but with dignified inconvenience. You become the story someone rich tells to impress someone richer. You're clever. You wear shame like a cape and mystery like perfume. And when the Marquis kisses your wrist, you don't flinch. You smile like you've just remembered something slightly scandalous. You're not in love, but you're definitely in. By the end of that week, he commissions you to design a new waistcoat. Not for himself, for his dog. You're disgusted. You do it anyway. The waistcoat becomes a joke at parties. You're the girl who dressed a Pomeranian in gold brocade. The dog starts getting invitations before you do. But soon, it's not about the dog. It's about you. One night, you overhear a duchess referring to you as the seamstress who snared a marquis without lifting her skirts. You smirk. That's almost true. And what's better than a lie people want to believe? You're on your way now. Not to nobility. No. That door stays locked. But you've picked up a needle and jabbed it into the fabric of high society. And darling, it bleeds easily. You wake before dawn. Your fingers still stiff from the dozen satin-covered buttons you fastened the night before. The city hasn't yet yawned. And already you're threading another needle. Today's job, a gown for the Comtesse de Saint-Cyr. A woman known more for her collection of exotic birds than for any notable intellect. She likes her gowns tight enough to restrict thought, let alone breath. You work quickly, listening to the cooing of a caged parrot that has learned to insult maids in Latin. You laugh under your breath. The Comtesse thinks the bird is enchanted. You know it's just observant. Like you, years pass like that needle to silk, silence to smile, day to scandal. You're no longer the girl who repairs lace cuffs in shadows. Now you're the whisper behind the whisper. The dressmaker with the discreet eyes and the ears of a confessor. Women trust you. Men ignore you until they can't. Your hands know their secrets, who's pregnant before she does, who's hiding a bruise beneath a sapphire pendant, who requested a dress lined with letters to a lover she will never name. These aren't garments. They're disguises. You're dressing women for war, even if they think it's only a ball. And you're preparing for your own invasion. By now, you've moved up. You rent a room above a tobacco merchant whose wife hates the smell of your starch and whose son has written you terrible poems involving rhyming metaphors about buttons. You accept the attention like you accept the rent regretfully. You keep your head down, but your eyes open. The shop floor is yours, but your mind wanders to salons you're not invited to. You begin stitching fantasy into every hem, Just a dash, a wink, a spark of rebellion. That's when you start sewing for the wives of diplomats, mistresses of bishops, and daughters of minor nobles who prefer embroidery to etiquette. One evening, you're called to an old townhouse in Faubourg Saint-Honoré. The woman waiting is young, no older than you, and draped in grief. Her brother has died in a duel over a rumor about a stolen book of poetry. She wants a mourning gown that doesn't mourn, something dangerous, something that makes people stop speaking. You deliver a dress that turns every head in the room. That night, she meets an Austrian ambassador. 3 months later, she marries his nephew. You don't get invited to the wedding, but your name makes it into a footnote in a gossip journal, the mysterious seamstress who makes death fashionable. You smile when you read it. Fashion, you think, is just memory disguised as taste. And you've started creating memories for the elite ones they can't forget, even when they try. But while your reputation grows among the women, it's the men who begin to take real notice. They see your work first on their wives, then on their mistresses, then eventually on you, because by now, you've learned the value of showcasing your own designs. You don't wear loud colors. You don't speak loudly either, but your presence buzzes like static under silk. One winter night, you attend a masked gathering, not as a guest, but as a tailor on call. A viscount tears his cloak during a duel reenactment and demands an immediate repair. You kneel at his side, needle in hand, as he drunkenly recites ancient Roman legal phrases into the night air. When you finish, he stumbles backward, lifts your hand, and declares, "She has saved my dignity." You don't correct him. The next morning, he sends a bottle of brandy and a note. Inside the note, a poem. Inside the poem, a promise. You've had your first aristocrat, and he won't be your last. Historians still argue whether your ascent was purely opportunistic, or if it reflects a broader trend of working-class women navigating power structures with subtle genius. You'd say both, because as the months pass, you begin receiving more than commissions, you get invitations. At first, small ones, backroom dinners, secret salons, but eventually, proper ones. You learn to walk like someone who belongs. You wear your own dresses. You say little, but you laugh at the right moments. And you always leave while someone is still in the middle of saying your name. By your 20th birthday, you've acquired 6 lovers. 4 of them are titled. 1 is married. 2 are in love with you. None of them know the others exist. Your strategy is simple: rotate appearances, offer no promises, and treat every encounter like a transaction, but wrap it in velvet and suggestion. You are never cruel, but you are never truly vulnerable either. You know what happens to women who are. One lover, an earl with too much cologne and not enough discretion, starts asking too many questions. He wants to know where you sleep, who else you see, what you think about when you're silent. You fake a cough for 3 days until he gets bored. He leaves for Italy and writes you 3 letters that you never open. Instead, you use them to line the pockets of a gown you send to a woman whose husband is suspected of treason. That's what you've become now, not just a dressmaker, but a courier of secrets. Each ribbon you tie is a knot of information. Each fitting, a confession. You know which generals are losing money and which countesses are gaining weight. You can predict a duel 3 days before it happens, and a wedding 2 weeks before it's announced. And all of this, you collect quietly, folding it away in mental drawers with lavender sachets of plausible deniability. One afternoon, while fitting the mistress of a minor prince, you accidentally overhear a name one you're not supposed to know. You don't react, but you stitch the seam 3 times slower. That night, a note arrives at your window, unsigned, with a small pouch of coins and one line loose thread. You sleep with a knife under your pillow for a week. But nothing happens. Paris keeps spinning. The nobles keep spending. And you keep threading your way through it all. Your mother visits once, unannounced, wearing a coat you don't recognize and eyes that are too quiet. She doesn't ask how you're doing. She looks at your room, the velvet, the mirrors, the half-finished bodices, and she nods. Not approval, just recognition. Like she always knew this was coming. She leaves without taking anything but a lemon tart you were saving for breakfast. You don't mind. You're not hungry anyway. You're too busy getting ready, because the invitations are growing more formal now. The names more powerful. And soon, you'll need more than charm and dresses. You'll need strategy, precision, and maybe a way out. But not yet. First, there are more names to memorize, more gloves to fit, more faces to pretend you don't remember. The game has only just begun. And you, little dressmaker, you're already winning. You're used to being invisible. But tonight the air shifts. You're in the laundry corridor of the Hôtel de Ville, the kind of place that smells like boiled starch, lavender soap, and frustration. It's well past midnight, and you're here because the Baroness de Vigny ripped a sleeve dancing too hard to a Hungarian waltz, and her maid begged you to fix it before the rumors caught up. That's how your night starts. But it doesn't end with stitches. Someone's thrown a party in the servant wing, unofficial and improvised. You hear the violin first off tune, frantic, alive. Then the voices, low and slurred with wine. You hesitate in the hallway, half tempted, half cautious. You've been careful all season, keeping your face out of things, keeping your lovers separate, your name softer than the fabrics you carry. But the music calls to something in you that needlework never does. You step into the chaos, and there he is. Not a noble, not yet. Just a younger son of a disgraced count, all cheekbones and dirty boots, laughing like the world owes him an apology he's never going to accept. He's drunk and bored and absolutely spellbound by your presence, even though you've done nothing but glance in his direction while holding a ripped sleeve and a needle still warm from your fingers. You look like the solution to a problem I haven't invented yet, he says, swaying. You tell him he smells like goat cheese and consequences. He laughs. That's how it starts. You're seventh, or maybe eighth. You lose count eventually. What matters is that he introduces you to something new, not love. You're not that gullible, but chaos with charm, recklessness in a powdered wig. He's the kind of man who kisses hands without permission and apologizes by composing odes to your elbows. The two of you talk nonsense in corners while nobles pass by with eyes that don't see. But one does, a woman in a pale blue gown, lips like judgment, watching from across the room with a familiarity that chills you. You leave before the sun rises, before the laughter fades into regret. You walk home with your shoes in your hand and the taste of cheap wine on your tongue. And for the first time in months, you realize you've slipped. You've let someone pull you off script. That's dangerous. Very dangerous. You're not supposed to be part of the story. You're supposed to write it, dress it, polish it, and send it out to dance while you stand backstage, perfectly composed. The next day, you find a note tucked into your pincushion. No name, just one sentence. Even ghosts cast shadows in the wrong light. You burn it without reading it twice, and you start remembering every lover, every smile, every overheard scandal. You make a list, a real one, on the back of a patterned sketch. 12 names, or at least 12 initials. You circle them, then you underline one. The first, the Marquis who started it all. You haven't seen him in months. You heard he's engaged. Good for him, or bad. Depends on whether his bride likes dogs and waistcoats. But it's not about him anymore. It's about what's coming. You sense it, like a thunderstorm, hiding behind perfume. Your lovers are starting to bump into each other. Your gowns are being requested in pairs, in rival colors. You overhear the word affair whispered with your name too close. You pretend not to hear, but you know. And in Paris, once you're seen, you can't be unseen. Historians still argue whether Parisian salon culture was a real political network or just a glorified gossip mill. But you know better, because you're caught in its gears. You're the grease and the grind. You're walking a seam line so fine it might as well be a guillotine wire. So you adjust, you pivot, you stop attending the salons, you send assistants instead. You become mysterious again. You control the narrative. You feed 3 different newspapers, 3 different stories about a mysterious woman with sharp scissors and sharper instincts. One calls you a muse, one calls you a menace, one just refers to you as the Velvet Shadow. You love that one. Meanwhile, the laundry room becomes legend. Servants whisper about the night a dressmaker kissed a disgraced noble and made the chandelier blink. They exaggerate, but that's good. Let them. You let stories grow wild, because overgrown stories provide cover. While they talk about the kiss, they forget the letter. They forget the whisper. They forget that in the midst of bad dancing and spilled wine, you stole something. A handkerchief, monogrammed, with a symbol that doesn't belong to the man who flirted with you. It belongs to a very different house, one known more for espionage than etiquette. You fold it carefully, iron it yourself, and hide it in a seam. Not to sell, not yet, just in case. Because if you've learned anything, it's this: fashion fades, power rots, but secrets never go out of style. You're summoned again to a chateau, this time by a woman who doesn't give her name, only her measurements. You're led into a windowless room filled with maps and firelight. She wears a wig too extravagant for daylight and asks if you've heard of a man named Duclair. You haven't. You lie well. She smiles. She says Paris is about to change. You ask if she wants lace. She says no. She wants armor. You give her a dress that could cut glass and a warning sewn into the lining in Morse code. Not that she knows it. It's a test. You want to see who comes next, because by now, you realize you're not just dating aristocrats. You're weaving yourself into a political net so wide it could collapse the entire season. 12 lovers, 12 doors, 12 ways out, or 12 knives at your back. You don't know which yet, but you start wearing gloves to bed, just in case. You sit in a room full of ribbons, yet you feel like you're wrapped in barbed wire. The season is in full bloom. Paris has unfurled herself like a peacock drunk on absinthe, and every aristocrat with a title longer than their attention span is dancing, scheming, and pretending they aren't falling apart at the seams. You, meanwhile, are stitching seams tighter than ever, both in gowns and in your stories. Because when you date 12 aristocrats in a single season, what you're really doing is learning how fragile power is. They come to you pretending to be confident. They leave wishing you loved them. You don't, but you know exactly how to make them think you might. And in Paris, that's the same as a declaration of war. Each one offers something. The Vicomte d'Albier brings you candied violets and sweaty compliments. The The Marquis de Tonnerre recites you ancient Greek epics and cries afterward. The Comte de Belle-Isle buys you shoes you'll never wear, and you keep them all on a loop, like spinning plates if the plates were emotionally unstable and carrying swords. You're careful, always. No overlapping dinner invitations, no shared perfumes. You dress for each man like a tailor of their fantasies. You speak in tones that match their moods. You flatter their insecurities, not their strengths. A man who knows he's clever is boring, but a man who doubts it, he'll chase your approval forever. You build your legend out of soft sighs and hard silences. And as you play the game, you realize something: the aristocrats, with all their silk and swagger, are easier to seduce than a cat with a saucer of cream. You don't even need to try. You just need to be new. They're addicted to novelty and terrified of being irrelevant. You become their distraction, their secret, their proof that they still matter. Historians still argue whether women like you truly wielded influence or were just tolerated amusements in powdered courts. But influence doesn't need titles. It just needs access. And you've got keys to the ballroom, the bedroom, and the whisper network. Which brings us to the Count of Rivol. He's your 9th, maybe your 10th, if you count the opera singer who keeps sending you earrings. The Count is different. Not kinder, just quieter. He watches you like he's trying to guess what spell you're under. He never touches you without asking, which, ironically, makes you trust him even less. One evening, you visit his townhome for a private fitting. He dismisses his staff, offers you wine. You don't drink it, not because you think he'll poison you, because you suspect he won't. And you like having an excuse to leave. He asks about your past. You lie easily. You tell him you grew up surrounded by bolts of fabric, never knowing what silence sounded like because your sisters never stopped talking. That part, at least, is true. He asks if you ever loved anyone. You say yes, then change the subject. You're too smart to give honest answers in houses with more mirrors than doors. But you notice something that night. A letter on his desk, unopened, sealed with a wax crest you recognize from one of your other lovers. And just like that, another thread knots itself in your web. You excuse yourself early and walk back through the night air. Your gloves cold and your heart suspicious. There's overlap, not between your lovers, between their business. They're all involved in something. You don't know what yet, but it reeks of treaties and tension. And suddenly, you're not just juggling egos. You're navigating alliances. You start paying more attention. Who sends notes in code? Who doesn't sign letters? Who asks you about other clients in the form of casual compliments? You become a human filing cabinet of political gossip. And while you're not exactly sure how dangerous it is, you know enough to be scared. But fear has never been your enemy. Boredom has. So you dive deeper. You host your first party. Not a ball, a salon. Private, exclusive, invitation only. You handwrite each card in your own ink, scented with rose and clove. The guests are carefully chosen, not the most powerful, but the most curious. You serve cold wine and hot rumors. You orchestrate conversations like a conductor, guiding people into collisions they'll remember for weeks. And you watch. You learn. You confirm what you've suspected for weeks. All 12 of your lovers are tangled up in the same delicate game of who knows what and whom. Some are working together. Some are working against each other. Some are doing both. And none of them realize you're the common denominator. That's your power. You're the silk thread tying them all together, and no one's bothered to check the hemline. One night, you receive an anonymous letter slipped under your door. It's just a question. No signature. No preamble. Just, do you think they'll protect you when they find out you sleep with your scissors under the pillow after that? But you don't stop. You keep dating. Keep designing. Keep whispering sweet nothings into ears that would betray you for a better title. The Marquis of Fontaine tries to propose. He gets down on one knee in the middle of a fitting session, holding a ring between his teeth for some reason. You decline politely, reminding him he still owes you for the satin cloak. He laughs, then drinks until dawn. Later, you hear he's engaged to a banker's daughter who believes Paris is a continent. You send her a sample book as a gift. It's blank. The Duchess of Auvergne calls you a charming nuisance. You consider embroidering that on your pillow. Your name is starting to echo in corridors you've never walked. You're not just the dressmaker anymore. You're her. The woman with a past no one can confirm. A clientele list that reads like a coronation scroll, and a laugh that men say has driven duels into motion. You still walk the same cobblestones, but now people step aside. You still enter through servants' doors, but those doors open quicker now. And yet, you know you're standing on a precipice. 12 lovers, 12 threads, and threads, when pulled. Unravel gowns and empires. You wonder when it all unravels, who will be holding the scissors. You hope it's you, because if it's not, it means someone beat you at your own game. And that, darling, is something you've never dressed for. You know the gown before it's even commissioned, the way a storm announces itself before the sky turns. It begins with a whispered request, something daring, something scandalous, something that would make a grandmother faint and a bishop sweat. You smile politely and nod, measuring the woman in question with eyes more experienced than your hands. She's the newest mistress of a minor duke with a major gambling problem. Her skin still smells like foreign perfume and confidence she hasn't earned yet. She wants a dress that will break the room. You deliver one that could start a revolution. The hemline is high too high. The bodice is tight deliberately so. The colors are blood red and moonlight white, stitched in a way that mimics torn parchment. It says I don't need your approval, but I dare you to look away. You call it the guillotine kiss, but keep that name to yourself. When she wears it to the market festival, yes, the market festival, because some fools mistake attention for affection. The crowd parts like someone fired a musket. Women gape. Men drop things. One child asks if she's a ghost. Another woman throws a cabbage. That's Paris. Applause and attack come from the same mouth. And before the week ends, you are summoned, not invited. Summoned to the office of the prefect of police. He wants to know if you're deliberately destabilizing public decorum. You say you just make dresses. He says, your dresses make riots. You think that's the best review you've ever gotten. But you don't say that. You just lower your lashes and wait. He lets you go. Eventually. Not because he believes you, but because his wife wears your gowns, and he suspects you know things about her that could rearrange his entire domestic peace. Which, of course, you do. And you wouldn't say a word, unless given reason. That's the unspoken threat you've cultivated, politeness sharpened like a dagger. Historians still argue whether fashion in pre-revolutionary France was truly political or merely an extension of court entertainment. You'd like to invite them to the market square on the day of that dress. Let them stand there, watch the faces twist from fascination to fury, and still try to tell you clothes don't change things. They do. because they're how people lie to the world. And you, little dressmaker, are the master of constructing beautiful lies. After the cabbage incident, commissions double. Everyone wants danger now. One woman asks for a gown that mimics a military officer's coat. Another demands feathers longer than her reputation. You comply, with flair. But you're watching, always watching. You know the nobles too well now. You know how they lean in when the rumors benefit them, and retreat when trouble curls at the edges. They're no different from the hemline you burnt last week, pretty. Expensive, and likely to fray. Your 12th lover arrives in the form of a man who doesn't belong. A visiting aristocrat from Spain or maybe Portugal. No one can agree. His French is too perfect, too polished, like someone who's practiced being forgettable. That alone makes you interested. You meet at a salon he wasn't invited to. You're wearing midnight blue, the kind of color that eats candlelight. He stares too long, but doesn't speak for the first half hour. When he does, it's about opera, not dresses, not gossip. Opera, and not in the performative. I think this makes me deep way. He speaks about it like someone who understands sorrow measured in arias and tragedy stitched into overtures. You listen, you forget, for just a moment, that you're playing a role. And then he offers you a dance. No touching, no flirtation, just a movement through space that feels like memory. You don't sleep with him. Not at first. That's new, and a little suspicious. But then again, maybe he's what you've been pretending to be this whole time, deliberate. You let him court you. Properly. Flowers. Poems. Even a breakfast on the Seine. Which, frankly, is ridiculous. But charming. You wonder what his angle is. Everyone has one. Is he after information? Influence? Or are you the trophy now? The scandalous prize. The one even foreign nobility want to parade around like a well-tailored threat. He becomes the 13th name you don't write down. Not yet. You want to believe he's different, which means he's probably the most dangerous one of all. Meanwhile, your clients are slipping. One baroness vomits on a bishop's shoes at a dinner party and blames the tightness of your corset. A general's daughter wears a sheer bodice and gets her engagement canceled within 48 hours. You smile, adjust your gloves, and keep taking orders. Because now it's not about keeping up appearances, it's about maintaining the illusion of control. You no longer sew for elegance, you sew for effect. Your designs say, "Look at me," and Paris listens. But you feel it, the walls of the city leaning in. The tension behind every invitation. Even the fabric seems to hold its breath. You receive a request from Versailles, the Queen's cousin. Supposedly, wants something bold, yet respectful. You laugh when you read it. There's no such thing anymore. Bold is rebellion. Respectful is irrelevant. Still, you design a dress so mathematically perfect in its proportions that it draws tears from the maid who unpacks it. You wonder if it'll be worn to a wedding or an execution. Maybe both, because Paris is changing. The parties are louder, the glances sharper. You see pamphlets being passed under napkins. You see a nobleman's carriage pelted with spoiled fruit. You hear a violinist stop mid-play because someone screamed about bread prices. The season is rotting from the inside out, like a peach left too long in the sun, and you are standing in the middle of it, in silk slippers, surrounded by people who still think the dance will never end. But you know better. You've seen the hems tear, and you've seen what's hidden in linings. One evening, at yet another salon, You don't really want to attend. Someone says your name like a punchline. Oh, her. She's dating 12 aristocrats, one for each month. Or is it each hour? Laughter follows. Not cruel, just comfortable. Like a story everyone thinks they already know. You sip your wine. You smile. And inside, you feel something shift. Because they're not afraid of you anymore. They think they've figured you out. And that, darling, is the most dangerous thing anyone can think about a woman like you. 12 men. 1 season. It sounds impossible when you hear it out loud. Something between a bawdy tavern song and a tragic poem told backwards. But for you, it was mostly logistics. Managing a dozen aristocrats with fragile egos, inconsistent cologne habits, and wildly different bedchambers wasn't seduction, it was scheduling. You didn't love any of them. Not really. Not the way they wanted, but you did enjoy the rhythm of it all. The way they each brought their own particular performance to the altar of your attention. One brought champagne and sonnets. Another brought a telescope and pointed at the stars while naming one after your eye. One wrote you a song so awful it became your favorite joke. Another asked if he could commission a dress just so he could watch you sew. You declined because you had a fitting that hour with someone far more interesting. The truth is, you didn't want to marry any of them. That was never the point. You wanted access, information, leverage, and Paris, with all its glittering desperation, was foolish enough to give it to you. You kept notes, not love letters, but observations. Who sat next to whom? Who smiled when which name was mentioned? Which noble house had just sold off land? Which duchess had begun to lose her grip on reality? You weren't just dating men, you were auditing an empire. And while the dresses you made got lighter and flirtier, the truth got heavier, because the more you knew, the more you realized how close this glittering world was to falling apart. Historians still argue whether pre-revolution Paris was as unstable as it seemed, or if the paranoia was retroactively applied by dramatists with a taste for collapse. But you could feel it in the way the wine soured faster, the way carriages passed quicker, the way even silk began to feel stiff in the wrong light. And the men, your men, they felt it too. Some tried to talk about it, nervously, usually after too much brandy. They'd mutter about taxes, protests, pamphlets with ugly drawings. But mostly, they didn't want to look down. They were perched on a cliff's edge, and they wanted you to be the wind that made them forget the drop. So you obliged. You kissed them when they started asking questions. You changed the subject with a story about a duchess who once wore her wig backward for 3 hours. You adjusted their collars and reminded them they looked like kings. You fed their egos so they wouldn't feed their fear. And every night, when they slept, you got up, dressed, and walked home alone under a moon that felt increasingly judgmental. You told yourself you were in control, and mostly, you were. Except when you weren't. Like with the diplomat's son. He wasn't supposed to be one of the 12. He wasn't even interesting at first. Quiet, competent, with hands that looked like they'd never held anything heavier than a quill. He asked if you liked gardens. You said you liked rain. He sent you a book of poetry written in Spanish, and when you told him you didn't speak the language, he said, "Good. That way you'll make up meanings." You didn't plan to like him. But then again, you hadn't planned any of this. And one afternoon, while fitting him for a waistcoat he claimed was for a cousin's wedding, he leaned forward, touched your wrist gently, and said, "You're the only honest person in this entire city. You wanted to laugh. You wanted to cry. You did neither. You smiled, said thank you, and stitched the seam too tight on purpose. That was the 6th time someone said they loved you. The first time you almost believed it. But you don't believe in permanence. Not in Paris. Everything here burns too fast. Relationships, fortunes, wigs, one of your lovers. Number 7, maybe 8 starts acting strange. He shows up drunk, slurs his words, accuses you of knowing too much. He never used to care what you knew. Now it scares him. You ask if he's all right. He laughs, tells you the monarchy is rotting from the inside, and that you should run while you still have legs. You ask where to. He says, away from mirrors. A week later, he vanishes. His townhouse is sold. His horses given away. You hear a rumor that he's fled to Austria. Another rumor says he's in the Seine. You never find out which. And maybe it doesn't matter. Because for every man who disappears, another arrives. The cycle doesn't stop. You get invitations to parties hosted by people you've never met. You receive unsigned packages, perfumes, laces, mysterious rings. One box contains nothing but a single red glove. No note. You burn it, just to be safe. You've become both legend and liability. Some people claim you're a courtesan. Others think you're a witch. One particularly imaginative pamphlet refers to you as the seamstress succubus, who threads revolution into corsets. You consider having it framed. It's better than the alternative being forgotten, because Paris doesn't forgive the invisible. If you want to survive, you have to be remembered, which is why you throw a masquerade. It's a risk, a dangerous one, but necessary. You rent out a dilapidated manor on the edge of town, refurbish only the parts people will see, and invite everyone who matters and a few who don't. You arrive last, dressed in silver, masked in black lace. You descend the stairs like a rumor. The music stops for a heartbeat, then swells. You are the event, and they know it. They crowd you, whisper to you, flatter you, envy you. Men you've kissed, men you've left, women who want to be you, women who want to end you. They dance, you orbit, and somewhere near midnight, the diplomat's son finds you. His mask is simple, his eyes are not. He offers you his hand. You take it. No one breathes. And together, you dance the slowest waltz of the night. You don't speak. You don't need to. You are both fluent in silence. And in that silence, you feel something give way. Not your control. Not yet. But the illusion of distance. You are dangerously close to caring. And caring, in Paris, is a liability worse than treason. When the night ends, you let him kiss you once, softly, in a corridor that smells like wax and fading perfume. Then you turn away. You don't look back. Because if you do, you might stop running. And you, clever girl, you've built this entire season on the art of escape. You used to think fans were just accessories, flimsy things fluttered by bored noblewomen, pretending not to eavesdrop. But then you learn they're more dangerous than knives. At least knives are honest. Fans, in Paris, are weapons of seduction, deceit, and war. There's a whole language built into the way they open. Close, flick, or cover a smile. You master it without being taught, just by watching. You notice that tilting a fan right means I want to meet you later, while holding it left means I already regret last night. Dropped suddenly. That's a challenge. Open slowly. That's a warning. You begin carrying one. At first, just to blend in. Then, to speak. Silently. And like any language, once you start speaking it fluently, people listen. Or misinterpret, which is often more useful. At a garden party hosted by the Duchesse de Saint-Hilaire, famous mostly for her flamingo collection, and her taste in violently orange gowns, you test the language of fans in earnest. You're seated near a cardinal's mistress and a baron's illegitimate daughter, both of whom seem more interested in what you're wearing than in the latest court gossip. You notice the count across the lawn staring too long. You flick the fan once, subtly. He excuses himself from his conversation with alarming speed. It works. You try it again 2 days later, at a salon in the 7th arrondissement, with a younger son of a viscount, who writes mediocre poetry and excellent political manifestos. The fan flick earns you a private conversation. The conversation earns you access to his correspondence drawer while he's fetching wine. You don't take anything. You don't need to. You just memorize a signature, a seal, and a date. Enough to connect him to something you overheard last week at a tailoring appointment for the Duke of Orleans' cousin secretary's mistress. That's how your world works now. Half rumors, half threads, sewn into something almost solid. You're not guessing anymore. You're confirming. And that, darling, is far more dangerous. Historians still argue whether aristocratic salons were coded communication hubs or just decadent distractions. But you've watched plans get made over olives and betrayals, whispered behind embroidered gloves. You know a war is coming long before the first sword is drawn. Just from the way someone's wine glass trembles when a name is spoken. And as your confidence in the fan language grows, so does your reputation. You're no longer just the seamstress. You're the one who knows things, the one who hears what wasn't said, the one who can be trusted until you can't. You're courted not just by men now, but by schemes. An envoy from Marais tries to pay you in emeralds to insert letters into coat linings. You pretend not to understand his accent and smile as you return the jewels. A widow from Lyon suggests you start hosting fittings that are really meetings. You decline, but compliment her taste in perfume. You're dancing on a cliff edge, blindfolded, in heels. And somehow, you love it. The thrill of it. The art of pretending to be harmless. But even you make mistakes. You attend a dinner hosted by the Vicomtesse de Florange, expecting light conversation and heavier desserts. Instead, you're seated beside 2 men who absolutely should not see you together. One, the Baron de Chantrey, is your Wednesday affair. The other, the Comte de Bellay, is your Sunday morning accident. Both know your scent. Neither expected to smell it at this table. You freeze, just for a moment. But a moment is enough. The Baron's gaze sharpens. The Comte's jaw twitches. You smile, raise your fan, and casually drop it. The movement is deliberate, graceful, and perfectly timed. The fan falls between them. The Comte picks it up. The Baron watches. You thank neither. Instead, you turn to the hostess and ask for a spoon, for soup that has not yet arrived. The tension breaks, but only just. You spend the rest of the evening performing neutrality, laughing at nothing, nodding at everyone. Your fan speaks volumes. You are, for all intents and purposes, Switzerland with better shoes. But that night rattles you. Not because you were nearly caught, because you were almost seen. Seen for what you are not, an ornament, but a player. The next day, you cancel 2 fittings. You burn a letter without opening it. You change your perfume. And you write a list. Not of names. You already have that. This is a list of motives. What does each of your 12 want? Not just from you, from the city, from the world. You start mapping desires like territory, love, power, escape, revenge, legacy. Some are obvious, some contradict. But what you realize is this: you are the shortcut, the mirror, the symbol. They don't want you. They want what they think you mean. To the Viscount, you're the proof he still matters. To the Baron, you're the thrill of rebellion. To the diplomat, you're the line he's not supposed to cross. To the poet, you're the metaphor he hasn't ruined yet. And to the others, you're what they'll boast about in 10 years if they survive what's coming. You've become their idea, not their lover, not their friend. An idea can't be punished, but it can be blamed. So you plan your exit. Not from Paris, not yet, but from the story they think they're telling. You start showing up less. You send gowns instead of yourself. You answer notes with one-word replies. You flirt in riddles and smile like someone who knows the ending of the play. You do it all so well, they don't even realize they've lost you. Because the power wasn't in their names. It was in your availability. And now that's gone. You're not abandoning the game. You're changing the rules. But you still need to know who's playing for which side. You call in favors. You press a kiss to the right wrist and ask the wrong question. You visit a dying countess who used to host the best salons before her lungs betrayed her. She tells you the whispers are growing louder, that names are being added to lists, that soon, people like you, unmarried, unrooted, and too clever, will be watched more than welcomed. You thank her. You adjust her pillows. You leave the room and walk home under a sky that feels too quiet. And when you get there, waiting in your room, perfectly folded, is a single black fan. You didn't put it there, and no one knocks. You sit, you breathe. You realize the message isn't hidden. The message is the fan. It says you've been seen. The fan sits on your work table like a threat dressed as a gift. Black silk, obsidian ribs, and a hinge that creaks just enough to suggest it's been opened and closed more times than propriety allows. You don't touch it for an hour. Instead, you pour tea, adjust the drapes, rearrange 3 bolts of fabric you have no intention of cutting today, and pretend not to feel your pulse in your throat. Because this isn't a flirtation. This is a message, and not the subtle kind you've danced with until now. This one doesn't need symbols. It says, plainly we know. The question, of course, is who he is. It could be anyone. One of the 12. A jealous rival. One of the wives who noticed her husband's cravat, smelling faintly of your lavender powder. Or worse, someone from beyond that circle. Someone who doesn't care about hearts or gossip. Only information. Because, let's be honest, you stopped being a dressmaker months ago. The gowns are still there. The silks, the laces, the buttons carved from pearl. But they're just the wrapping paper now. What you sell is access. Insight. A quiet glance across a salon floor that tells someone their secrets aren't safe anymore. You've built yourself into a confidant, a curiosity, and, without meaning to, a liability. So you pick up the fan, slowly, carefully, as though it might bite. You examine it for hidden messages, none. You smell it, no perfume. You check the ribs for engravings, initials, even fingerprints. Still nothing. And yet, everything about it screams intention. You wrap it in linen and slide it into the back of your wardrobe. If someone's watching, they'll know you got the message. If not, well, then you're just paranoid. Which, these days, feels more like survival than a flaw. That same afternoon, you receive a visit from one of the quieter lovers your 11th, a Viscount too young for his title, and too pale for your taste, but charming in a way that suggested he'd never been told. He arrives unannounced. You let him in anyway. He looks around the room, eyes lingering on the dress forms, the sketches, the unopened wine. Then, without preamble, he says, "You're not safe anymore." You keep your face neutral, the way you do when a client demands something impossible and expects it for free. You ask him what he means. He fidgets. He says there's talk, in the salons, among the footmen, that your name's been mentioned in circles where names don't get mentioned lightly, that someone thinks you know something you shouldn't, that someone else thinks you're working both sides. You ask which sides. He doesn't answer, just stares at your fireplace like he's hoping it'll explain things better than he can. You thank him, offer tea. He declines, leaves quickly, like the room has suddenly become too small. After he's gone, you don't cry. You don't panic. You do what you've always done. You sit down and begin stitching. Not because the gown matters, but because your hands need something to do while your mind races. Historians still argue whether women like you ever truly held influence, or if your stories were exaggerated after the fact. But you don't feel like an exaggeration. You feel like a fulcrum. One small movement and the balance shifts. You consider fleeing, briefly, but to where and for what? You've built too much here. Too many alliances. Too many open threads. Leaving now would signal guilt. And guilt is something people chase. So you stay. But you simplify. You cancel the next 2 salons. You send apologies written in your best detached script. You deliver gowns through intermediaries. You turn down invitations with polite ambiguity. And most importantly, you stop seeing your lovers. All of them. You ghost them gently, no explanations. Just soft refusals. Missed meetings. A silence padded in silk. Some take it well. Some write increasingly desperate letters. One sends flowers that wilt before you open the note. The silence creates its own echo. Whispers spread, as they always do. But this time, the whispers carry weight. People say you're ill, that you're in mourning, that you've joined a convent, or a cult, or that you were never real to begin with. You let them speculate, because stories are shields, and the less they know, the safer you are. Until one evening, when safety shatters itself across your front steps. A courier arrives, breathless and bruised. He carries a package and a warning. "Don't open it if you want to sleep tonight," he says. Then he runs. Inside the package is a gown, one of yours. But you didn't make it. Not this one. The stitching is wrong. The lining is uneven. The fabric's quality is low. But it's undeniably your design a replica. Meant to fool. Meant to damage. You inspect it closely. Find a note pinned to the hem. Just 3 words: "We replaced you." And now, you understand. This isn't about romance anymore. It's not even about revenge. It's about control. Someone is building a version of you, one they can use, one they can manipulate. And if they succeed, they won't need the original. You've become obsolete before your time. You laugh, quietly, bitterly, because of course. You should have known. In a city like Paris, no story stays yours for long. They always find a way to steal it, soften it, sell it. But if they want to replace you, they'll have to be better. And they aren't. Because what made you dangerous wasn't the dressmaking. It wasn't even the seduction. It was the silence, the listening, the way you watched. No one can fake that. Still, the message is clear. You're not just being watched. You're being erased. You decide to write letters, not warnings, not confessions, just facts. One for each of the 12. Not love notes, more like dossiers. The things you know, the things you could say. You seal them in separate envelopes, label them only with initials. You don't send them. Yet, you hide them in the hollow base of your dress form, just in case. Because one day, you might need to remind them all exactly who they played with, and exactly why they should have been more careful. The first duel starts over a misunderstanding, which is to say it starts exactly the way most duels do in Paris. You hear about it in the most absurd way possible from a butcher's apprentice who delivers your duck pâté. He mentions it casually while wrapping your order, like he's commenting on the weather. Did you hear about the blood on the stones near Pont Neuf? Something to do with a woman. Always is. You smile politely and pay him, even though your stomach twists before your hand reaches your coin pouch. You already know. You always know. It's the Comte de Lancy and the Baron de Bellay. They crossed blades just before dawn, because one of them caught the other in a lie, and you were the subject of that lie. Not your name. Of course they wouldn't dare, but a description that could only be you, the girl with the silver fan and the silk thread voice. You shouldn't be flattered. But you are. Briefly. Until you learn that the Baron now walks with a limp, and the Comte refuses to speak your name aloud. You didn't ask for this. But then again, you didn't stop it either. Duels are part of the world you built. You made your lovers feel special, then made them feel replaceable. That combination turns men into fools, and fools into duelists. It's almost funny, except you're the one who has to write a letter to the Comte's sister, explaining why he won't be able to attend her wedding. You send her a brooch instead, something tasteful, with opals, and you never reply to the Baron's next letter. You burn it, not out of anger, but because it reeks of regret, and you have no patience for men who remember your worth only after bleeding for it. But that's not the last duel, not by far. By the end of the month, 3 of your 12 have clashed, directly or indirectly. One over a misplaced glove, one over a poorly timed compliment. One, simply because the phrase "her laugh is mine" escaped someone's lips after their 3rd glass of wine. Paris begins to notice. And when Paris notices, it whispers. The whispers become anecdotes. The anecdotes become warnings. People begin calling you La Sorcière des Salons, the witch of the salons. It's not entirely inaccurate. You've conjured attention from thin air, summoned favors from silk, and hexed half the male population with nothing more than a gaze and a measurement tape. You learn that a caricature of you has been posted outside a print shop in the Latin Quarter. It shows you standing atop a mountain of broken hearts, waving a fan like a queen's scepter, while noblemen duel below. You send someone to buy it, frame it, and hang it in your private dressing room. It's accurate enough to count as a portrait, but you also start to feel at the edge of your safety fraying. You can't keep the men apart. Not anymore. You're invited to a gathering at the Palais Royal, and the list includes no less than 4 of your lovers. You attend anyway, out of defiance, or perhaps curiosity, wearing black velvet and a smile that says, "Try me." They avoid you, not because they no longer want you, but because wanting you has become a liability. They nod politely. Some bow. One doesn't look at you at all. And for the first time, you wonder if your spell is breaking or simply evolving. You're no longer the woman everyone wants to win. You're the one they want to forget they lost. And that makes you dangerous in a different way. Historians still debate whether women like you had true agency, or if you were simply caught in the gears of male rivalry. You think that question is absurd. The duels weren't about you, they were about control. About men reminding themselves they still had power in a city that was slipping away from them faster than a lover's promise at sunrise. Your name just made a convenient blade. You spend the next week laying low. You avoid salons, skip invitations, even refuse a commission from the Marquise d'Aubert, who throws a dramatic fit and sends you a hat box full of dead roses. You burn those too. The ashes smell faintly of jealousy and rosewater. And just when things seem to quiet, just when you think you've gone invisible again, a carriage arrives, the diplomat's son. Of course, he hasn't dueled, hasn't even spoken about you publicly. He's been silent, which in Paris is more unnerving than noise. He steps into your workshop like he owns the floorboards. You don't greet him. He doesn't expect it. Instead, he walks straight to the dress you're working on and examines it like a clue. You've been quiet, he says. You've been watching. You reply. He nods. I think it's time we stop pretending we don't understand each other. You raise an eyebrow. Do we? Yes, he says. We're both waiting to see who moves first. It's not a threat. Not exactly, but it isn't affection either. It's recognition. You're both players, both too smart to fall for the game, too deep in it to leave. You ask him why he's here. He says he has a question. Just one. What happens when someone decides you're worth killing for, but someone else decides you're worth killing? You don't answer, because that's not a question. That's a warning disguised as curiosity. He leaves without touching you, without even looking back. You sit alone in your workshop. The scissors in your lap feel heavier than usual. The room feels colder. Outside, Paris hums with the sound of life carts, shoes, distant laughter, but it no longer feels like your city. It feels like a stage you're no longer directing. That night, someone throws a rock through your window. No note, just glass and silence. You sweep it up slowly, methodically, as if it were lace. Because even as the city trembles, and the duels continue, and the whispers grow louder, you still control one thing: your hands. And as long as they're steady, as long as you can thread a needle and cut fabric with clean precision, you are not done. You are not defeated. You are simply between acts. The marketplace riot doesn't start because of bread. That's the story they print. The one they whisper through the alleys and scrawl in ink beside the caricatures. A crowd enraged by rising grain prices. It's neat, convenient, and satisfies the conscience of people who can afford to eat brioche 3 times a day. But you know better. You were there, or at least close enough to hear the first scream. It started with a dress, one of yours. A client, well, former client now decided to debut a new piece you'd designed for her at the Rue de Montmartre market. She wanted to make a statement, stand out among the commoners, parade her privilege like it was perfume. And the dress did just that. Velvet so deep it swallowed light, embroidered with gold thread that shimmered like gossip. And the hem, oh, the hem. You'd raised it just slightly above the ankle. It wasn't scandalous by court standards, but in the muddy, hungry chaos of the market, it was an insult. The crowd parted for her at first, more out of disbelief than deference. Then someone spat. Someone else threw a turnip. A third cried out. You think we're blind to your games? And that was all it took. Paris is a tinderbox waiting for an excuse. Her dress became the spark. In the panic, a stall overturned. Someone screamed about hoarding. Another swore they saw a nobleman laugh. And suddenly, the air filled with fists, curses, and the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Within minutes, guards arrived. Too many, too armed, and the cobblestones ran wet with something more than rain. You weren't wearing the dress, but your name was stitched into its lining. Literally, a signature detail. A flourish of ego you hadn't thought twice about until now. Now, it was a target. The girl was unharmed physically, but she fled the city within the week. You never saw her again. What you did see were the consequences. The next day, a pamphlet circulated depicting a masked woman wielding a sewing needle like a dagger. The headline read, "Tailor of Turmoil, the seamstress behind the street revolt." You laughed. Once. Sharp and hollow. Then you realized they weren't joking. Your name was being spoken in corners that never touched perfume. You were no longer a curiosity. You were a cautionary tale. Historians still debate whether the riot was politically motivated or simply a moment of hunger tipping into violence. But you know better, because it wasn't about food. It was about dignity. And dignity doesn't take kindly to mockery. The worst part wasn't the attention, it was the silence. Clients stopped showing up. Lovers stopped writing. Invitations dried up like petals pressed too long between the pages of a book no one opens anymore. You weren't scandalous now. You were dangerous. And Paris doesn't protect women like you. It forgets them, or replaces them, or watches them disappear with a shrug. So you retreat. You stay indoors. You lock your windows. You refuse commissions unless you know the buyer personally, and even then, you require cash in advance. Your world shrinks to the size of your workshop, and even that feels too large on bad days. Then, one night, there's a knock. Soft, measured. You don't answer immediately. You listen. Wait. A second knock. You recognize the rhythm. A pattern one of your lovers used to tap on your wrist like a joke. You open the door, slowly, and find the Comte de Lancy, pale as a ghost, holding a newspaper and a pistol. He doesn't aim it at you. Yet. He just walks inside, closes the door behind him, and says, "I need to know if you're the one who betrayed me." You don't flinch. You ask him what betrayal he means. He tells you about a letter, one he sent, weeks ago, hidden in a cufflink. A message meant for a political ally. A message that never arrived but was quoted, almost verbatim, in a speech given by his rival. You ask what that has to do with you, he says, because I gave you that cufflink to fix. You remember. Of course you do. It was chipped. Trivial. You gave it to an assistant. She handled the repair. She no longer works for you. Not since the dress incident. You explain all this. Calmly. Quietly. He believes you. Eventually. But not before he breaks down. The gun slips from his fingers. He collapses into a chair, head in hands. You make tea. You sit. Neither of you says anything for a long time. Because what is there to say? Trust, once frayed, is harder to mend than silk. When he leaves, he forgets the pistol. You keep it, just in case. The days blur after that. You lose track of which shoes belong to which season. You forget names, not important ones, just yours. The you that used to giggle behind fans, that sewed dreams into sleeves. that danced between dukes like wind between curtains. She's fading, replaced by someone harder, someone quieter, someone who sleeps with a knife between her mattress and a pistol by the door. You start answering notes again, but only in code. You resume commissions, but only for clients you trust, which, these days, means barely anyone. You begin designing a new gown, not for anyone else. For you, midnight blue, with a bodice like armor and sleeves sharp enough to draw blood. You don't know where you'll wear it, or if, but it feels like a declaration, not of war, of survival, because Paris isn't a city anymore. It's a battlefield in lace. And if you're going to be a casualty, you'll be the best-dressed one they've ever buried. It should have been a harmless evening, just another tedious soiree, hosted by a woman who married her title, but never quite earned it. You weren't even planning to attend. You'd declined twice already. But then a letter came, hand-delivered, unsigned, with only 4 words on thick cream paper. You'll want to see. You knew better. You always know better. But curiosity is a drug, and Paris is a city that whispers your name in enough keyholes to make you believe you're still in control. So you dress carefully. Not too bold, not too quiet. Something that makes you hard to place in a crowd and easy to remember in a story. You arrive fashionably late, slipping past the doorman with a nod and a coin he doesn't want to be seen pocketing. Inside, the room smells like musk and ego. Nobles crowd the edges like flies on fruit, sipping wine and sharpening compliments into insults. You spot 3 of your past lovers immediately. One won't meet your gaze. One bows too quickly. The third stares long enough for it to become uncomfortable. You drift. You sip something sweet and forgettable. You pretend to be amused by a minor count story about how he once outran a peasant revolt by hiding in a hay cart. But your eyes keep scanning, looking, waiting. For what? You're not sure until you see it. Him, or rather, you. Across the room, standing under the chandelier, in a dress that mirrors one of your recent designs with just enough difference to raise the hair on your arms. She looks like a sketch of you done by someone with a decent memory and a shaky hand. Her posture is studied, her smile too precise, and on her wrist, dangling delicately, is the silver fan. Your fan, the one you hid, the one that disappeared. You stare. She notices. She smiles, then looks away, as if you were the imposter. You leave before the main course. You don't run, but your steps are faster than they should be. Your heart pounding with a rhythm you thought you'd silenced months ago. Back at your flat, you lock the door, pull the curtains, sit in the dark, and try to breathe. Someone is trying to replace you, and they're getting good at it. You begin making a list, not of lovers, not this time. This list is different. It's a map of your identity, what makes you, you. Your patterns, your habits, the dresses only you would dare design, the words only you say, the perfume blend no one else wears rose, smoke, and something you won't name aloud. You gather it like armor, because this isn't a game anymore. This is a theft, a performance you didn't script. The next morning, someone leaves a basket outside your door. Inside is a wig, powdered, styled, and unmistakably yours, or meant to be. Tucked beneath it is a note, a preview. You want to scream. Instead, you laugh, once, sharp, and then you get to work. Historians still argue whether identity, especially for women in your position, was ever truly their own, or simply borrowed from the people who looked at them. You've built yourself from whispers, stitches, and moments stolen between the lines of other people's stories. And now someone is trying to unwrite you. You won't let them. You start visiting people. Not the salons, not the nobles, the others. The ones behind the scenes, the laundresses, the footmen, the kitchen girls who see everything and forget nothing. You ask questions, casually, carefully, about newcomers, about women with your mannerisms, about copies. Some deny, some deflect. One, a maid who once helped you hide a broken clasp, grabs your wrist and says, "You didn't hear it from me, but she pays in foreign coins." That's enough. You begin tracing threads, following whispers, and then you find her, not in a salon, not in a ballroom, but in a tailor shop, 3 streets from where your father once disappeared. She's arguing over thread count. You watch her through the window, and for a moment, you almost admire her. The precision, the calculation. But then she laughs. Your laugh, almost, and your blood runs cold. You step inside. Quiet, controlled. She doesn't see you at first. The tailor does. He freezes. You nod once. She turns, sees you, and something flickers in her eyes. Not fear, not guilt. Something else. Recognition. You approach. Close. Closer. "You wore my fan," you say. She smiles. "I improved it." You smile back. Then let's see who they believe. You leave before anyone can ask questions. Before your hands betray you. Back at home, you take out every design you've ever created, every sketch, every note. You burn the ones that could be copied. You lock away the rest. You write a letter to no one, to everyone describing what you've seen. You seal it, hide it beneath a floorboard, because you're not sure how this ends. But you know one thing: you won't disappear quietly. You start designing again, but not for Paris, not for the nobles, for yourself. Gowns that no one would dare wear, cuts that defy tradition, materials imported from places no one in your circle can pronounce. You become a ghost in society. Whispers claim you've gone mad, that you fled, that you joined a troupe of actors or died in a duel of your own. You encourage the rumors, because while they're looking away, you're watching, waiting, preparing. You will not be replaced, not by someone who thinks wearing your face is the same as surviving your life, because you remember the turnips, the fan, the duels, the blood, the betrayal, the sound of your name in mouths that didn't deserve it. And she doesn't, not yet. But soon, if she pushes harder, you'll show her why you lasted this long, and why she won't. You're learning that lies, like dresses, come in layers. The outer layer is soft, seductive, something like flirtation or flattery. The second is stitched tight, a bit closer to the bone: reputation. 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 But it's the inner lining that always leaves the bruise. That's where the rot lives. And by the time it stains the hem, the damage is already done. You didn't mean to lie, not really. It started with small omissions. A smile instead of an answer. A silence where a truth might have lived. But now, your whole life is a tapestry of truths bent so gracefully they look like grace. And Paris, darling, is starting to pull at the threads. It begins with a dinner party. Not one of yours. You haven't hosted anything since the fan incident, what? But you're invited, of course. You almost don't go. But you're tired of shadows, of being whispered about like a myth. So you show up in ivory, simple and unadorned, as if to say nothing to see here. Just a woman who once made the mistake of being too fascinating. The table is long and overdressed. Candles sputter in protest at the perfume fog. The guests include 5 nobles, 3 poets, 2 foreign dignitaries, and 1 woman you once danced with before her brother tried to propose. You're seated next to a marquis whose breath smells like secrets and cinnamon. Across from you, the impersonator. She's dressed in something new. Your silhouette, but not your taste. Too many buttons. Too little bite. She lifts her glass toward you. You clink gently, and for a moment, the table watches both of you, like a play with 2 leads and 1 script. It's then somewhere between the 3rd course and the 4th that someone asks a question. An innocent one. Something about your past. Didn't you grow up near the Sorbonne? It's not even the wrong place, but it's not quite right. And for the first time in months, your tongue hesitates. Just a breath, just a pause. But long enough, her head tilts. The room sharpens, and suddenly, you feel it doubt threading through the room like an invisible hand unpicking your seams. Later, in the powder room, you corner her. You don't raise your voice. You don't threaten. You just lean in, slow and deliberate, and ask, "Do you even know who I was before they knew my name?" She meets your gaze. Do you? Then she leaves. Her perfume lingers too long. You return home and find your latest commission waiting. A dress you'd sent out to the Duchesse de Montreuil. Returned, untouched, with a single note pinned to the neckline. Another supplier has matched your quality. That's all it says. But you feel the slap, because it's not about fabric. It's about fear. They think you're slipping, and worse, they think you're replaceable. You throw the dress across the room. It catches on a chair, slumps like a drunk. You sit down beside it, fingers trembling, mind racing. And you think, when did it start to slip away? When did the city you once wrapped around your waist like a belt decide you weren't sharp enough anymore? Historians will debate this period of your life. Some will say you lost control when you fell in love. Others will claim you never had it. A few will believe you orchestrated the whole decline for drama. But you'll remember the truth, if only to yourself. You were tired. Tired of being clever all the time. Tired of dressing rooms full of eyes. Tired of mirrors that showed your shape but not your weight. And somewhere in that tiredness, you let a lie slip. A small one. A single thread left dangling. And someone pulled it. Still, you don't break. Not yet. Because the thing they always forget is that you've been undone before. You know how to sew yourself back together. You just need time. So you start working again, late into the night. Designs more complicated, more dangerous, more like spells than clothes. You use new materials, metal threads, hidden pockets, message-stitched linings. You're not dressing women anymore. You're arming them. One evening, a girl no older than 16 comes in with a request. I need to look like I can destroy a man with a glance. You smile, take her measurements, and get to work. Word spreads, slowly, quietly. But it spreads. Not the same crowd as before, not the salons or the soirees. A different kind. Daughters of revolutionaries. Mistresses of men who underestimate them. Girls who've watched too many friends disappear into marriages like prisons. They don't ask for ball gowns. They ask for armor. And you give it to them. You see her again, your copy at a street corner. Alone this time. She looks thinner, sharper, like someone's been feeding her secrets but not food. You consider speaking. Instead, you walk past. Let her smell your perfume. Let her remember who wore it first. Back at your flat, you find another package. No name, just a note. I know the truth now. You don't open it. You don't burn it either. You hide it in the floorboard, next to the others. You're collecting truths now. Yours, theirs, everyone's. Because when the city burns, and it will burn, you want something to hold in the ash, something to say. I was here. I mattered. I made them look. You begin writing at night. Not stories, not designs. A record of what you did, of what they did, of every dress, every lover, every lay. It's not confession. It's insurance. You hide the pages behind a false panel in the armoire, beneath the velvet you never sold. You don't intend to die. But if you do, you want your ghost to be thorough. And through all of it, the impersonator keeps rising, getting invitations you don't, wearing dresses she didn't design, using stories that aren't hers. You watch. You wait. You know what Paris does to women like her. The city will love her until it needs someone to blame, and you'll be ready when it does. Because you're not just a name. You're not just a scandal. You are a mirror. And everyone here, eventually, gets cut on their own reflection. There's something about the way whispers move in old houses. They slide under door frames, curl into candle smoke, perch on the lips of half-drunk women, pretending not to eavesdrop. And lately, those whispers carry your name like a cracked bell, not quite musical, no longer reverent, and just loud enough to make people pause before they speak. You've become a question, not just who you are, but what you're doing, what you're planning. And while Paris has always been nosy, it's never been this sharp. You first notice it in the servants. The ones who used to smile when you arrived now glance down. The seamstresses who begged to apprentice with you now leave the room when you enter. Even the courier boys, those unruly bundles of elbows and gossip, have stopped loitering near your window. It isn't personal. It's strategic. People are protecting themselves. Because somewhere, someone has been asking questions about you. Not just about your clients. Not just about your designs. About why. A dressmaker knows the schedules of 3 dukes, the taste in wine of 2 foreign ambassadors, and the private habits of half the National Assembly. Someone wants to pin a motive to your patterns, and the air has turned colder because of it. You suspect the spy came from the inside. Maybe your former assistant, the one you dismissed after she miscounted bodice buttons 3 times in a week. Or perhaps the housemaid at that salon last month, who watched you too carefully while pretending to pour cider. You've lived long enough in this city to recognize when someone is listening through a smile. So you do what you always do when cornered. You observe harder. Watch who flinches when your name is spoken, who fumbles their wine glass, who forgets their own lie mid-sentence. Because guilt never sits still. One evening, you trail a whisper down the alley behind a pastry shop. You pay a young boy 2 sous to tell you what he's heard. He says, "They say you have files." You don't respond. He adds, "They say you write things you're not supposed to know." That's when you realize it's not just rumors. It's suspicion with a purpose. Someone's framing you. Carefully, deliberately, stitching together a version of you that serves their ends better than your own. So you tighten your circle. The girls you still trust, you pull closer. The rest you let fade. You begin sending decoy letters. You pay a butcher's niece to deliver false notes to irrelevant addresses. You speak only in metaphors. Your new designs have hidden linings. reinforced with messages written in mirror script. They say things like, "I see you and this isn't the whole story," and "come closer if you dare." Historians still argue whether espionage and fashion ever truly intersected in the salons of pre-revolutionary France. Most dismiss it as romanticized nonsense. But you know better. You've sewn information into petticoats. You've witnessed love affairs disguised as tailoring appointments. And now, you're the subject of someone else's strategy. Because someone wants to break the chain of your influence. Someone thinks fear will shut you down. And for a while, it almost works. You stay inside more. Refuse commissions from new clients. Burn 3 letters unopened. Your world contracts again. Quieter this time. But Paris doesn't let you stay small for long. Because just when you think they've forgotten you, a summons arrives. Not an invitation. A summons. To the Hotel de Ville. Signed with a wax seal you don't recognize. No name, just an address. And a time. You go. Of course you do. Dressed plainly. Hair pinned tight. No perfume. You walk there alone. Every footstep a question. Inside, the hallway smells like ink and mildew. A man meets you at the door, gray coat. Ink-stained cuffs. Eyes like empty rooms. He doesn't ask your name, just gestures for you to follow. You're led to a parlor that smells like secrets and spilled brandy. Inside 2 men and 1 woman, well-dressed, but wrong, like actors playing nobles. The woman gestures to a chair. You sit. She begins. We've heard things about your work, about your access. You say nothing. One of the men slides a piece of parchment across the table. A list. 12 names. All of them familiar. All of them yours. You don't touch the list, the woman says. That's a very dangerous circle to keep. You reply. Circles protect their own. She smiles. Not when they break. Then she leans forward and says it. The question. The one you've been dreading. Are you gathering information for someone? You should lie. You mean to lie. But something cracks. Not loudly, not visibly. Just enough for your eyes to harden. You say, if I were, would you be sitting here asking me about it? There's a pause, a long one. Then the other man, the one who hasn't spoken, says, Careful, mademoiselle. We have the means to stitch a new narrative for you, and you understand. It's not a threat. It's a choice. Cooperate, and they'll let you exist. Resist, and they'll let someone else be you. Your imposter's shadow looms large now, doesn't it? You leave the Hotel de Ville with nothing in your hands, but everything clenched behind your teeth. You were never meant to be powerful. You were meant to be charming, useful, contained. But you escaped your box, and now they're trying to fold you back into a shape they can name. They don't want your truth. They want your role. So you do the only thing left. You make yourself impossible to replace. You release a new collection. Not through salons, not through nobles, through street girls and laundresses and flower vendors. Simple cuts, clever linings, bold statements, dresses that whisper rebellion, and even as they dazzle. You put your name on every hem. You add a symbol to each tag, a needle crossed with a crown. You let the world know that you made these, not a copy, not a shadow. You, and they sell. Oh, how they sell. Because the city is hungry again. Not for gowns, for clarity, for confidence, for something that feels like honesty wrapped in elegance. And you, against all odds, still provide that, still survive that. One day, someone will ask how you endured when others vanished. They'll say you were lucky, or ruthless, or divine. but you'll know the truth. You didn't win because they stopped hunting you. You won because you learned to hunt back. Exile doesn't come with fanfare. It arrives in a folded note, tucked beneath your door, with words too polite to mean anything kind. You've been invited to rest. The handwriting is practiced, impersonal, and too smooth to belong to anyone who's ever spilled ink on purpose. You laugh when you read it, but only because the alternative is to scream, invited to rest, as if your entire existence has been a social engagement you overstayed, as if leaving is a suggestion rather than an ultimatum. You know what it means. Someone's decided you're too visible, too complicated, too difficult to erase quietly. And rather than risk the noise of an arrest or the scandal of a trial, they've chosen silence. They've chosen countryside. You're sent away under the guise of convalescence. The story floats through salons within hours. She's exhausted. She's overwhelmed. She's ill. Poor thing. One woman says you've had a nervous collapse. Another insists you're pregnant. A poet, one you've never met, writes an ode to your supposed consumption, rhyming lace with grace and face 3 times in a single stanza. You don't bother correcting them. Let them mourn. It's easier than letting them suspect. They send you to a chateau just outside of Tours. It's grand enough to feel like a reward, empty enough to feel like a punishment. You arrive in the dead of night, escorted by a man with a scar under his eye and no intention of making conversation. The carriage door closes behind you with the finality of a coffin lid. The chateau is beautiful in the way abandoned places are full of echoes and furniture that remembers better conversations. The staff is minimal: 1 cook, 1 gardener, and a housemaid who seems to know your name before you offer it. No one asks questions. That's the point. You wake each morning to fog. Endless, rolling fog that creeps into your sleeves and clings to your breath. The days blend together. Tea, walk, write. Tea again. Stare at the hills. Watch letters arrive addressed to no one and signed by ghosts. You're not forgotten, not quite, but you're being carefully filed away. Like an old scandal too embarrassing to display but too juicy to destroy. Historians often forget exile doesn't need a border. It's not about being sent far away. It's about being removed from the conversation. From relevance. From danger. You've been politically disarmed without a sword being drawn. It's clever. It's quiet. It's cruel, but not permanent, because you still have your hands, your mind, your memories, and your rage soft, controlled, measured like the pleats in a morning gown. You begin to sew again, not for anyone else, for yourself. Small projects, then larger ones. You take a gown apart just to reconstruct it better. You embroider your own name into a petticoat, then rip it out, then stitch it back in backwards. You let the fabric speak your grief. The housemaid notices. She starts bringing you old linens to practice on. One afternoon, she says, "They think you're gone." You smile. Let them. She nods, and something passes between you. Not trust, not yet, but maybe something approaching alliance. 3 weeks into exile, a package arrives, wrapped in brown paper, no sender. Inside a fan, not black, not silver, red, blood red. The ribs are made of bone. The note reads, "She's still in Paris. You don't need a name. You know who it means. The impersonator, the shadow in your silhouette. She's still rising, still wearing versions of your story like it was hers. And whoever sent this wants you to know. Wants you angry. Wants you back. You should ignore it. That would be safest." But you're done being safe. You begin writing letters again. Not many, just a few. Carefully selected recipients. People who owe you favors. People who remember what it meant when your name was whispered at a salon and everyone leaned in. You write plainly, without metaphor. I am not gone. I am waiting. You don't sign your name. You don't need to. One night, you catch the housemaid reading one of your letters before sealing it. You don't confront her. You could just say, "Make sure it reaches them intact." She nods. The next day, she brings you wine she couldn't possibly afford on her salary. You drink it. Slowly, news trickles in, though never directly. A dress of yours appears at an opera in Paris, unworn for months, now suddenly requested by name. A man you once loved writes a column under a pseudonym describing a woman in exile who sees better from the outside. A pamphlet circulates in Montmartre with your symbol a needle crossed with a crown printed small in the corner. The city is remembering, not all at once, but enough. Historians love a fall from grace. They chronicle it with delight, but they rarely track the climb back, because it's slower, quieter, less dramatic, and far more dangerous. You're not coming back to be adored. You're coming back to be reckoned with. The red fan stays on your writing desk. You open it sometimes, just to remind yourself how it felt to be hunted. Not to fear it, but to study it. To prepare, you sketch new designs, strange ones. A bodice that ties with knots used in ships. A skirt with folds like city maps. A gown that bleeds dye when it touches heat. They're not meant to be worn. They're meant to be understood. Every stitch a warning. Every hem a boundary. You know she's still out there, wearing your mannerisms like a borrowed cloak. But you also know what Paris does to women who rise too fast on borrowed names. Eventually, someone pulls the thread, and when she unravels, you'll be there, not as her ghost, but as the original. You don't ask for permission to return. You simply wait for the right weather. And when it comes, when the fog lifts one morning, and the carriage is left outside your gates without a driver or a name, you pack your trunk. Not because you were summoned, because you decided. The air in Paris hasn't changed, but your lungs feel different in it now. You arrive at dawn, veiled and unannounced, dressed like a widow from somewhere too minor to matter. No one stops you. No one gasps. That's the trick you don't return with fanfare. You return with silence. Because silence is heavier. Silence makes people look twice. You hire a carriage not to your old address, but to a smaller apartment near Rue de la Verrerie. You pay in cash, leave no name, and keep the curtains closed for 3 days. The city doesn't know you're back, but the city isn't your concern. Not yet. You're here for her. By the 3rd night, you slip into the streets, just walking. No agenda, just eyes wide open. Paris at night smells the same soot, sugar, and secrets. The cafes glow with candlelight. The salons echo with the kind of laughter that ends in lawsuits. You pass by one window and see her, your impersonator, smiling at someone important, hand on their arm, dressed in a gown you once sketched on a napkin while half asleep. The pattern is off. The seam's too tight. It's close, but not right. She's close, but not you. And she knows it. She glances at the window, freezes, just for a second. You're already gone before her smile recovers. That's all you needed confirmation. She knows. Someone told her. Or she felt it. You're back, and the city just hasn't caught up yet. You start rebuilding quietly. One note at a time. One dress at a time. Not for nobles. For the people who've always known how power shifts in the dark. A laundress asks for a morning gown, but smiles when she says it. A butcher's wife brings a bolt of black fabric and says nothing. You stitch at night and sleep during rainstorms. The city slowly exhales your name again. But not everyone is happy. By the end of the first week, a letter slides under your door. No signature, just a phrase. You were supposed to stay buried. You pin it to the wall, right above your scissors. Beneath it, a single word, ja. You do? You watch as your old clients pretend not to know you when you pass them, as your name resurfaces at salons, carefully tentative, like a ghost returning to knock. You watch as one of your former lovers speaks your name at a dinner party, only for the room to go still. He says it again, louder, and smiles like a man lighting a fuse. You're not a secret anymore. You're a conversation again. Historians never document the re-entries, only the falls. They adore ruin and rarely acknowledge recovery. But returning is harder, more brutal, especially when someone else has filled the space you left behind. And she has. Oh, how she has. She's turned your mystique into routine, your sharpness into flirtation, your dress designs into profitable imitations. She walks like you, laughs like you, sighs with just enough drama to pass for authenticity. But she doesn't know the weight. She doesn't know the blood behind the seams. You watch her from across a ballroom a week later. She's wearing red, bold, desperate. You're in slate gray, silent. She sees you. She doesn't flinch, but her hand tightens around her fan. Good. Let her sweat. You walk past her as the orchestra plays something overwrought and syrupy. You murmur one sentence in passing. Wearing the crown is different than surviving the coronation. She doesn't respond. She doesn't need to. Her eyes say it all. You're no longer the past. You're the threat. Again. That night, someone breaks into your workroom. Nothing stolen, just disarray. Ribbons unspooled, sketches torn, a mannequin beheaded. You take it as the compliment it is. You've returned enough to be feared. You clean up. You begin again. But the city's changing faster now. Things you once whispered are now shouted in cafes. The price of bread rises. The laughter in salons turns brittle. Pamphlets show up with sharper ink. One morning, a girl arrives at your door with blood on her hem and asks for something she can run in. You give her boots and a jacket stitched with pockets. She says thank you with eyes that have seen too much. You don't ask questions. You never have. The impersonator begins slipping. It's small at first, using the wrong name at a party, confusing dates in a story, claiming to have attended a salon you know was canceled. People notice. People talk. Paris is cruel to those who pretend too long. One night, someone publicly calls her the counterfeit. She leaves early. You stay. That same week, you receive a dinner invitation, handwritten, from someone who once said they'd never speak your name again. You decline, not out of pride, out of clarity. You don't need to reclaim your old life. You're building a new one measured in loyalty, not gossip, in memory, not mirrors. Still, you make a final appearance, one grand return, a gala for the minister's daughter. You arrive alone. You wear white, not bridal white, funeral white, the kind that makes a room go silent, the kind that says, I buried the woman you thought I was, and look who came back. You don't seek her out, but she finds you. Of course she does. She walks up slowly, dressed in something extravagant and unoriginal. You don't greet her. You just say, you wore me well. She says nothing, because there is nothing left to say. She's run out of borrowed breath. You leave before midnight. You always do. Leave them wanting. Leave them guessing. That night, you return to your new flat and light a candle. You write one last letter, not to anyone in particular. It simply says, "You can't be replaced if you refuse to disappear." You fold it, tuck it under the ribbon of your oldest dress form, and you go to sleep. Paris, for now, is quiet, but you are not done. It begins with flowers, not the expensive kind. No rare orchids or perfumed violets pressed between cards. Just a simple bouquet of white gardenias, left on your windowsill, with a ribbon tied too carefully to be innocent. No note, no name. You stare at them for a long time, letting the silence wrap itself around your spine like a corset. You know who sent them. Or rather, you know the kind of man who would. The hopeful one. The deluded one. The one who thinks a flower can erase what a sword never could. He's back. The Baron. The one who once held your wrist too tight and spoke your name like it was an apology and a curse at the same time. You burned his letters. You thought you'd buried the idea of him beneath other, newer mistakes. But Paris is a city of returns, and not all of them are requested. You leave the flowers where they are, let them wilt in the open air. And that's when the rumors start. Not about you, about him. That he's taken to wandering the salons again, this time with a bottle in one hand and a book of poetry in the other, reciting your name like a spell that might reverse his misfortune. They say he's lost his estate, that his cousin now wears his signet ring, that he's proposed to a woman 3 times and been turned down twice with the third answer still pending, hanging in the air like bad perfume. You're not surprised. You're not even amused. You're tired, because Paris loves a man in decline more than it ever loved a woman on the rise. His mistakes are romantic. Yours were dangerous. His fall is tragic. Yours was engineered. Then comes the bouquet again, this time inside your apartment. No broken lock, no sign of forced entry, just flowers in your bedroom, and a note in his handwriting. Let's start again. You don't scream, you don't panic. You write a reply. 3 words. We already ended. You hand it to the delivery boy with a coin and a smile sharp enough to open a seam. But it isn't just him. That season, they all begin circling again. The 12th aristocrat, the diplomat's son, the poet with the tremble in his right hand. They reappear in corners of cafes, in the fringes of salons, in the margins of letters signed with someone else's name. One by one, they try to reclaim the version of you they knew their version. But she's gone. That girl they passed around like a shared confession. That woman with the sharp tongue and the softer heart. You're steel now. You're polished. And worse for them, you're indifferent. It's the poet who dares say it out loud. At a salon hosted by a marquise who's made gossip into religion. He raises his glass and says, "Some women leave the room. She leaves the decade. The laughter is too loud, too forced. You don't laugh. You just finish your drink, set it down, and look him directly in the eye. Some men mistake poetry for forgiveness, you say. The room hushes. You walk out. The silence follows you like perfume. Historians still argue whether women like you ever truly escaped the shadows of their past lovers. Whether your legacy was your own or stitched together from male memory. But you know the truth. You weren't defined by their desire. You were defined by your refusal to need it. Still, one invitation comes that you can't ignore. It's handwritten, the seal unbroken, the name at the bottom unmistakable. The Baron de Lancey, the man you almost married, The man who once gave you a brooch shaped like a fox and said, "You are too clever to be caged." He wants a meeting, not in public, not at a party, in a private garden, neutral ground. You consider burning it. You consider going. In the end, curiosity wins. It always does. You wear black. Not morning black, warning, black. You arrive early. He arrives on time. He looks older. Not in the face, but in the way he stands. Like someone carrying something they don't talk about. You sit. He doesn't speak at first. Just looks at your hands. "You still sew?" he asks. "Only when it matters." You say. He nods. "Then I'm getting married." You smile, slow. To someone who thinks you're whole, to someone who knows I'm not. Silence again. Then he leans in, lowers his voice. "They still talk about you." "Good," you say. "Better than forgetting." He laughs. It sounds like surrender. He asks you something then. Not for a dress, not for a letter, just a name. A name you haven't spoken in months. The impersonator. Who is she really? You consider lying, but lies are for people with time, so you tell him the truth. She's someone who wanted to be remembered for what I did, but she didn't want to bleed for it. He nods. Doesn't press. You leave before he does. That's how it's always been. Back at your apartment, you begin writing again. Not memoir. Not yet. But something like a ledger. A history of choices. 12 men, 12 months, 12 mirrors. You're not ashamed of any of it. You're not proud either. You're cataloging. Because stories, left untended, become myths. And you refuse to let someone else write your ending. Then comes the bouquet again. White gardenias. But this time, they're not from him. They're from her. The impersonator. The note is simple. "Let's meet." You burn it. Not out of fear, out of boredom. Because the game is over. You've won. Not because you fooled anyone, but because you endured. They tried to write you off. They tried to rewrite you. They tried to steal your face, your name, your voice. And now, when people speak your name, they don't whisper. They lower their voices out of respect. And Section 17, they say you died. Not once. Not dramatically. Just slowly, in the quiet folds of gossip that turn into truth when repeated enough times. The first whisper came from a man who once kissed your glove and now can't remember which wrist it belonged to. He says he heard you fled to Spain, or maybe the colonies. Someone else claims you took your own life in a silk-draped room because the price of fame finally closed in like a corset pulled too tight. Another swears you married a minor duke and spend your days in the countryside embroidering pillows with the names of your former lovers. Paris, as usual, gets the facts wrong, but keeps the poetry. And you say nothing. You watch, you listen. You do not correct, because there is a particular freedom in being thought dead. No one expects you at their parties. No one asks you for favors. You move through the streets like a rumor in reverse, known but not seen. And sometimes that's safer, especially now, because now you know what they're trying to do. They're stitching shut your legacy, one seam at a time. The impersonator still walks your old circuits, still signs your name in flourishes too wide to be elegant. She speaks at salons where you once whispered. She started claiming the stories you lived, the duels, the scandal. Even the dress that started a riot, she says it was her idea. That she designed it in a fever dream of lace and rebellion. You almost laugh when you hear it. Almost. Until you realize she's being believed. So you go to the museum, quietly, alone. It's not a museum in the formal sense, just a dusty room off Rue du Bac filled with relics from the last 2 decades of chaos. A chipped teacup once owned by a mistress who vanished. A broken quill that supposedly signed a revolutionary pamphlet. A pair of gloves burned at the fingertips, encased in glass. And in the far corner, behind faded velvet rope and a placard with your name spelled slightly wrong. There it is, your dress, the one from the market riot, still intact, still dangerous, the fabric dulled with time, but the cut unmistakable. Yours, except the card says otherwise. Attributed to Madame Eliane Marais, the impersonator, her name, your dress, your history. You don't shout. You don't correct the curator, who doesn't even look up from his ledger. You just stand there, still, letting your silence scream, because you remember everything about that gown. The rushed stitches in the left hem, the tiny blood spot from a pricked finger you covered with embroidery, the weight of it in your arms as you handed it over, not knowing it would start a fight that would end with soldiers and slogans, and someone swearing they saw Marie Antoinette flinch. You remember, and now it's someone else's story. Historians still argue over attribution, over who made what, over which details matter. But none of them were there. None of them heard the breathless laughter in a candlelit hallway, or saw a duke cry because the sleeves made him remember his mother. You didn't just make gowns. You made memories, proof of life. And now they're trying to fold it away under someone else's label. You go home. You don't cry. You don't drink. You sew. You take the oldest bolt of fabric you own, one you saved for something special, though you never knew what, and begin to work. No sketches, no patterns, just instinct. This one's not for the city. It's not for history. It's for you. Every seam a sentence. Every pleat a moment they tried to erase. You don't design revenge. You design remembrance. Word spreads, as it always does. Not about you, about the dress. People hear whispers. She's making something again. She's back. She never left. And then a new rumor starts. She died, but her ghost kept sewing. You let them believe it. You wear the myth like perfume, because you've learned the truth: a dead woman is safer than a living one. A dead woman gets believed. A dead woman gets canonized. So you become her. You haunt salons. You reappear at one, wearing the new dress, and no one dares ask where you've been. One woman faints. A man drops his glass. The impersonator is there. Of course, she sees you, sees the real version of the story she's been trying to rewrite. She doesn't speak. She can't. Because your presence is a full sentence, and she has nothing left to add. You don't confront her. You don't need to. She'll unravel on her own. Because you can fake a voice, fake a silhouette. But you cannot fake survival. You lived the years she only borrowed. You bear the scars she pretends to describe. And Paris, despite its faults, always recognizes authenticity eventually. The museum updates the placard. Quietly. No announcement. Just a correction. Designer unknown. It's not your name, but it's not hers either. And that's enough. For now, you keep sewing. Not every day, not like before, but enough to feel the thread between your fingers. And remember that no one ever made a dress the way you did, not because of your skill, but because of your story. You begin mentoring girls. Just a few. Just the clever ones. The angry ones. The ones who already know how to lie without blinking. You teach them about seams, but also about silence. about when to speak, about when not to be seen, and how to keep a needle hidden in their corset, not just for sewing. The city moves on. It always does. New names rise, new scandals bloom. But sometimes, at night, you see someone wearing a cut that looks familiar, a color you invented, a phrase you whispered once, now passed along as fashion wisdom. And you smile. You are not dead. You are history in motion, and they will never forget you again. It's been over a decade, maybe more. The city has changed its wig and its name, but Paris is still the same old flirt full of secrets, stone, and the soft echo of regrets, trying to masquerade as nostalgia. You no longer walk the salons, not because you're afraid, but because you've outgrown them. Let the new ones have their turn spinning in heels and hiding knives in lace. You're done spinning. Now, you curate. You haunt more than you participate. And in that haunting, something strange happens. Your legend returns, not through salons, but through exhibits. It starts small. A museum on the left bank mounts a display. Silhouettes of the scandalous. You're there. Not your name, of course, but your shape. A replica of the dress you wore the night the Duke nearly proposed, and the Baron nearly stabbed him over a poorly folded fan. The neckline's wrong. The fabric's too shiny. But the plaque is clear, inspired by the designs of the mysterious dressmaker, known only through salon folklore. They've turned you into folklore, not forgotten, but filtered. You visit late at night, pay the entry fee like a stranger, stand in front of a mannequin that mimics your hips, but not your defiance. The room is full of murmurs, tourists, students, lovers, too new to argue. And then you hear it. A guide, young, sharp-voiced, says, historians still argue whether the original designer was a courtesan, a spy, or simply a fashion genius born too early. You suppress a smile. It's always those three options, never all of the above. They've made a museum of maybes, dresses behind glass, fans labeled with guesswork, one cracked mirror they swear belonged to Madame X, a name they invented because no one could agree on yours. You wonder if it's the one from the Hôtel de Crillon, the one you cracked yourself after your 12th lover told you he was marrying a duchess for duty. Not desire. It doesn't matter. They've preserved the reflection, even if they misplaced the woman. You notice something else. A letter. Yours. Framed in a corner, behind protective glass. It's been copied, transcribed, printed in cursive script on a cream placard. The original ink has faded, but you recognize your hand, your phrasing. It wasn't meant for the public. It was one of the ones you wrote during exile. You left it folded under a false floorboard, sealed in wax. And now, it's captioned with bold type. Proof of her political involvement remains inconclusive. You laugh. Quietly. Because there it is. The one thing no one can frame properly. Not a dress. Not a letter. Not you. They want to put a title to you, but none of them fit. Dressmaker is too soft. Courtesan too cruel. Spy too clean. So instead they build a museum of ambiguity and let the silence fill in the rest. You sit on a bench near your own memory and watch as a group of girls walks through. Young. Laughing. One points at the dress and says, "I heard she once turned down a prince." Another replies, "I heard she caused a revolution." The third says nothing, just stares at the embroidery on the hem, then looks around the room like it might start talking. That's the one you like. You don't correct them. Why would you? You've already rewritten history once. Let them write it again, with your outlines, your echoes, Let them make you into a ghost, a cautionary tale, a legend with better lighting. Because in their version, you don't end, you linger. And there are other exhibits now. Another museum. This one more daring hosts a show titled Threads of Power Women Who Stitched the State. You're the opener. First gown on display. They paired it with a map of pre-revolutionary Paris and a quote from a letter you never sent, but probably could have. I dressed them for power and undressed them for truth. That's not your phrasing, but it's close enough, and the sentiment flawless. Historians still argue. They always will. Some claim you never existed, that you're a composite, a romantic lie made of corsets and coincidence. Others insist you were real, but harmless, just a clever girl with too many lovers and an expensive taste in thread. And a few, the better ones, say you were a strategist, a survivor, a seamstress who wielded a needle like a scalpel and knew exactly where to cut. You never write a memoir, too easy to twist, too tempting for others to edit. Instead, you send anonymous notes, one to a museum curator, correcting a date, one to a playwright who got your silhouette wrong in Act 2, and one, folded delicately, slipped into the pocket of a mannequin wearing a dress you never made, that reads simply, "This isn't how it happened, but it's prettier this way." You walk the city now with your head high and your name low. You visit the places that don't remember you, and the ones that do. You nod to the statue outside the opera house that's supposed to depict a muse of scandal, because her lips are shaped like yours. You sip tea where the brothel used to be, and toast your own ghost in the mirror behind the bar. You don't need applause anymore. You don't need credit. You have something better. Permanence. Because even if they got the details wrong, the fan, the colors, the name, they remembered the shape. They remembered the ripple you caused. And now, the ripple is part of the current. The girl who once stitched secrets into seams now has a legacy too layered to fold. And so your dress sits behind glass, misattributed, misunderstood, but still standing, just like you. You stand at the edge of a mirror in a room full of mannequins, watching yourself as remembered by strangers. The shape they've recreated is close, but the walk is wrong. The spine too stiff, the hands too frozen. You once said fashion is memory with a hemline. Now, it feels more like amnesia wrapped in satin. These dresses, these displays, they remember the silhouette, but not the woman inside. You know why. Fabric lasts longer than whispers, but memory real. Memory never lies flat. The museum curator finds you there sometimes, lingering behind the exhibit marked Unknown Seamstress, circa 1778. He's read every theory. He once offered you a copy of a monograph that claimed you were 3 different women in disguise. You laughed, told him that was the closest anyone's ever gotten to the truth. He still doesn't know who you are. He suspects, but he doesn't ask. And you don't tell, because at this point, identity is less important than intention. You're not here to be known. You're here to witness what they've done with the scraps. It's not just dresses anymore. A new wing is being added. Objects of influence. A necklace you once bartered for silence. A fan from the infamous duel. A velvet shoe with your initials, wrong initials, burned into the soul. They're building a shrine to what you represented. And that, ironically, is more truthful than anything you could have written. Because it's never been about facts. It's always been about feeling. Historians still fight over your legacy. One paper calls you the tragic dressmaker, who symbolized the slow unraveling of the ancien regime. Another describes you as an erotic myth manufactured by later Republicans to discredit the upper class. Neither is flattering. Both are incorrect. But at least they're trying. That's more than you expected. You were ready to be forgotten. You planned for it. That was your escape hatch disappear while they argued over what shade your dress was. But then, something started to shift. People stopped asking who you were and started asking what you meant. And that is where your true survival began. Because when a city builds monuments to meaning, you live longer than marble. You walk through the displays now like a ghost chaperoning her own wake. Tourists murmur in a dozen languages. Children press their noses to the glass and ask questions their parents can't answer. Why is this one different? Why doesn't she have a name? And occasionally, someone will ask the guide, was she real? The guide never gives a straight answer. She smiles and says, that depends on how well you remember her. The girls in the street wear high collars now, ironically. A cut you once pioneered as camouflage, now reborn as couture. They don't know they're channeling you, but that's the best kind of legacy, isn't it? Influence without explanation. Style passed down like instinct. Every fold, every flare, every calculated imperfection, a whisper from the past to the body that wears it. One day, you pass a seamstress's stall near the river. She's young, not more than 17. Her hands are cracked from dye and weather, but her eyes are sharp. She's working on a piece that makes you pause a sleeve with embroidery that winds like a question mark. You ask her where she learned it. She says, it's from the old codes. They say it's a symbol for knowing something and saying nothing. You smile. You ask her where she heard that. She shrugs. It's always been around. You buy the piece. Not because you need it, because it proves something. The world has folded your memory into its fabric. They can't take that out now. Not even with scissors. There are exhibits about revolutions now. 2, tied to your dresses. One particularly bold scholar claims your style predicted the storming of the Bastille. Another says the scandal over your riot gown softened public tolerance for nobility. You let them argue. You've never needed agreement to survive. Debate is its own kind of immortality. Occasionally, someone recognizes you. Not because of your name, which you shed years ago, but because of your eyes. You look like her. They whisper, the one who started it all. You nod. Just once. Let them wonder if they're right. You never confirm. You never deny. Because once they decide, you might be, they've already built you again. Sometimes, you think of the 12, not with longing, not even with regret, just as part of the pattern. Each was a stitch, not all neat, some frayed, some too tight, but necessary to hold the whole thing together. You wonder what happened to them. Some are surely dead. Some changed their names. 1 or 2, you hope, still wear guilt like perfume. You visit one of their graves, the Count, the one who offered you safety, and ended up needing it more than you ever did. His stone is modest. You leave nothing. Just stand there. Say nothing. His legacy will never mention you. But yours can't be told without him. That's enough. You still sew. Of course you do. You always will. You make small things now. Repairs. Alterations. Occasionally a full dress, but only when it matters. When the woman asking has eyes like you, used to clever. Scared. Unsatisfied with safety. You never teach them the whole story. You give them the thread and let them make their own. You keep a notebook, not for history, for clarity. Names you want to remember, lies you don't, truths you once told only to mirrors. You don't plan to publish it, but you know one day someone will find it, and maybe, just maybe, they'll finally get the story right, or close enough. The museum updates your plaque again. This time, a curator adds attributed to the so-called Parisian ghost dressmaker, whose influence on fashion, scandal, and memory remains a matter of debate. It's the most accurate description yet, and at the bottom of the plaque, someone no one knows who has scratched a single sentence in tiny cursive. She stitched herself into history without ever being hemmed in by it. You smile when you see it, because finally, someone got it. It doesn't end with applause. No finale, no curtain call, no last scandal to seal your legacy in gold leaf and theater. The story just fades gently, like a dress left in sunlight too long. You stop appearing in salons. The invitations dry up, or perhaps they never arrive. You no longer haunt the corners of museums, or linger in cafes where the new scandalous are still learning how to speak with their eyes. You vanish slowly, which is the only safe way to disappear. The city no longer whispers your name with awe, but it doesn't forget either. There are girls, always girls, who speak of you like folklore. They wear your influence on their sleeves without knowing it. One adjusts her corset a little too sharp. Another laces her boots in a pattern you once used to hide a blade. These are your heirs, not by blood, but by instinct. They don't need to know your name. They just need to know what you survived. And you did survive, didn't you? That's what they never expected. You were supposed to burn bright, then collapse. A scandal, a legend, a lesson. But you didn't give them that. You stayed. You adapted. You changed shape every time they tried to pin you down. You outlived the men, the gossip, even the revolution. You outlived your own reflection. You live now in a quiet apartment above a bakery. The girl downstairs doesn't know your story, but she brings you pastries every Sunday and says you look like someone who's seen too much to say it out loud. She's right. You smile. Thank her. Let her talk. She mentions her mother wore a dress once with sleeves like a swan's wing. You remember making it. You don't tell her. Let her believe it was magic. You wake with the sun. Sew small things. Never anything too complicated. You fix hems. Let out seams. Mend the worn edges of memory. A local boy brings you letters from Paris, and sometimes clippings. One has your face sketched poorly, and the headline, "Was she the first fashion revolutionary?" You use it to start a fire. It burns beautifully. One evening, you walk along the edge of a river, not the Seine. Too many ghosts there. A quieter one, farther south. A child asks if you're a witch. You ask why. He says, "You don't look like everyone else." You pat his head and say, "That's the point." He grins and runs off. You think he'll grow up fine. You keep a box under your bed. It holds the last fan. The real one, not black, not red, ivory, cracked at the hinge, fabric yellowed with time. You never displayed it, never gave it to a museum, because some things aren't for remembering, they're for surviving. Sometimes you write letters, not to anyone in particular, just phrases, moments. You seal them and tuck them in strange places. One under a park bench. One in the lining of a market stall curtain. One in a drawer at a tailor's shop where a girl with clever hands might find it someday. Each note ends the same. Trust no legend without lipstick on the rim. You hear the impersonator retired, married some minor noble. lives in a chateau where no one remembers your name. That's fine. You always knew her ending wouldn't be written in ink. Just comfort. Quiet. A silk coverlet. And silence. That's a kind of death, too. You also hear there's a play, a satire, based loosely on the infamous dressmaker who undid a dozen men. You're not angry. It's badly written. They made you blonde. Cast a man as the narrator. You laugh once and fall asleep before the second act. You still have the gloves from the night you almost married. Still have the knife from the time you thought you'd need it. Still have the dress you made for no one but yourself. You don't wear it. It's enough that it exists. And when people ask where the real story is, you let them dig, let them write, let them perform, let them pretend. Because you already told your story. You just didn't use words. You used fabric. You used silence. You used yourself. And you were never hemmed in. Not by corsets. Not by courts. Not by the city that tried to swallow you whole and ended up coughing you back out with a bruise under its lip. They won't find you again. They'll find echoes, footnotes, a whisper in an archive, a seam that shouldn't be there. But they won't find you. Because you're not a memory. You're a technique, a stitch, a pattern only a few can read. And those who can, well, they don't need the name. They just need the thread. And now, as the city fades from your mind, and the candle gutters low, you find yourself standing not on cobblestone, but on memory, on silk, and silence, and stories, too heavy to carry, too delicate to let go. The Paris of your dreams was never real, and the woman they tried to make of you was never whole. But still, you walked through it all, threading power through narrow needles, and learning to survive in a world that only ever wanted you decorative. Let the mannequins hold their pose. Let the portraits flake their paint. You don't need monuments. You were never meant to be still. You were meant to be worn, whispered, misunderstood, and always remembered. As your eyes drift closed, feel the soft weight of those years settle around you like a shawl pulled close. Let the past loosen its laces, the city grow quiet, and the whispers tuck themselves gently into corners. The needle is down, the dress is done, the story has been sewn. End of script. Sweet dreams.